Regulates your metabolism. That's all of your bone growth. That's how you use your energy, how you use your food, your muscle strength, even how your heart works. All of those things are associated with thyroid hormone. Every single cell in your whole body needs thyroid hormone to work because every cell is sensitive to it because it regulates metabolism. And it's a really important thing to have for optimal health. So the thyroid is something that we're seeing more in conventional medicine because they're prescribing it more. But there's a lot of reasons why everybody's thyroid is struggling, and we're seeing such an increase in prescriptions. But also, have you ever been told that your labs are all normal, but you don't necessarily feel well? That's because they don't look very deeply into it. So thyroid hormone is usually, or thyroid labs, if they're run by a general provider, a general practitioner, they usually only run TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone. And it's a really silly test. It's like sitting down with my grandmother and expecting to get to know me. TSH is 2 full steps away from the active form of thyroid that we really want to pay attention to, that really has the most metabolic effects. So TSH stimulates, it comes from the brain and it goes down to the thyroid hormone and it makes mostly something called T4. T4 is what most people take if they are on thyroid replacement. That's your Synthroid or your levothyroxine. And so that's taking the hormone to replace, it's hormone replacement therapy, to replace what you're not making yourself. So T4 is produced about 80% of the time by the thyroid. The other 20% is something called T3. Now, T3 is the active form of thyroid. That's what we really need in order for our cells to work. And it's a lot more active than T4. So T4 usually goes out from the thyroid out into the body to all of your different cells and tissues and gets converted to T3. And T4 and T3 will ride around on a bus of a protein in the body so that it kind of gets carried around where it needs to go. So it just doesn't, act on anything. It does move around the body and go where it needs to go rather than working on your red blood cells, which are probably one of the only things that need, T4 less likelihood, right? So, or less necessary. So when your thyroid is checked, usually they just look at TSH, when what we really want to know is about T3. And we really want to know what kind of T3 or T4 is free and off of those carrier binding proteins or those carrier molecules that are taking it around the body. Because if it's on the carrier molecule, it can't work. So that's why at Naturopathic MD, we run a much more in-depth thyroid panel, which you can see if you're listening on CTR Network. There is a link underneath this podcast event where you can go to Naturopathic MD and look at the lab and get to see whether you really need it or whether you're interested in finding out that information. And so we run TSH because it's important to look at, free T4, free T3, because we want to see what's really going on as far as feedback mechanisms and what's actually able for your body to be using. Now, the other thing that makes our lab test even more in-depth and special than what you would get in convention, because there's a lot of conventional providers who are up on thyroid prescription and they're at the forefront and they're paying attention. And so often they will run your T4 and your T3, but many of them do not look at your reverse T3. And what that means is your T3, let's say it looks like this, okay? And that's what you need in order to use it if you're a cell. It needs to look like this. Under stress, your body will create something called reverse T3, which is the mirror image and looks like this, like the left hand. Now, let's say that you have a receptor that's like a handprint entry key code in order to get into some security system, right? If you put your right hand on, it will let you in. Makes sense. Now, what happens if you try to put your left hand on that? It doesn't work because it doesn't fit. And so even though they look so similarly, you cannot interchange one for the other. And reverse T3 is thought to be a hibernation sort of molecule. And a lot of people with fibromyalgia or chronic pain or chronic fatigue, they have a lot of storage forms of reverse T3. But we'll talk about what to do about that a little bit later. So hopefully by now you understand why we do the testing that we do and how important thyroid is. And let's relate it to your real lives. So if you don't have enough thyroid hormone, you can have a lot of different symptoms because, as I said, it works for just about anything and everything. So if you're a child and you don't have enough thyroid hormone, that begets cretinism, where there's growth problems and the brain development is impaired and they don't, grow as tall or as well. And that's because it's a perfect example of how much we all need thyroid, and it's not just for growth. So if you've got too much thyroid, let's talk about that first, because it's more rare and it's something that we don't necessarily treat with functional medicine, because by the time it really goes full blown, the thyroid most likely has to be eradicated so that you don't have heart attacks and terrible swelling and heartbeat palpitations, anxiety, sweating is what I mean, not swelling. Swelling comes from hypothyroid. If any of you watched The Shining, if you're old enough to remember The Shining, Sherry Long is a perfect example when she's so scared and her eyes are bugging out. That's what a lot of Graves' disease is. One of the signs is the eyes bugging out a bit. Weight loss can come from it, having fevers or elevated body temperature, as well as problems sleeping, etc., because your metabolism is ramped up so high that it's on the other end of the spectrum. And so that usually what happens, and it can come from a couple of different reasons. Usually it's autoimmune disease or extra stimulation of hormone for whatever reason. It's most likely stress, toxicity, inflammation, right? But again, by the time people get diagnosed, it usually means they have to take the thyroid out or ablate it with radioactive iodine, so that you need to have physiological replacement of your thyroid hormone because you can't make it anymore. So that's like Graves' disease. Now, the other one that a lot of people know about is Hashimoto's, which is autoimmune. And what happens is the immune system attacks the thyroid. And initially, because you're attacking the cells that hold thyroid hormone, you'll have hyperthyroid symptoms. And so you'll have a lot of stimulation of your thyroid, and you can have anxiety, sweating, insomnia, weight loss. And then as the thyroid is destroyed by the immune system, then you start to get the other symptoms of thyroid problems, which is too low of thyroid hormone. Now, it's very diverse, but a lot of people notice that their thyroid is out of balance first from hair loss. Like when you have your hair just coming out in clumps, often that's a first sign. Also, if you see the edges of your eyebrows are starting to thin, or if the bottom part of your leg, if you're losing hair in the bottom part of your leg, or even on your genitals, and if you're having relatively low hair growth or loss of hair, because hair is a really metabolic part of our bodies. And so people that have lots of fast nail growth and hair growth and a lot of it, then their metabolisms are really working to keep that up because it's kind of non-essential. And so if you're losing your ability to use your thyroid, then hair will be one of the first things to go because you don't really need it in modern society for very much. And this is different from male pattern baldness, where you lose a lot of it in the crown. This is just kind of like general thinning all over the place. Now, I will share that this did happen to me a couple of years ago. I was working way too much. I think I had 5 jobs at the time. And I wasn't eating breakfast. So my morning, I wasn't being a very good patient. And my morning would just be a big venti Starbucks, with cream and sugar in the morning. And then I would work all day until dinner time, and I didn't really take a lunch. And then at dinner, I would have a big meal, and then I would stay up late because it's the only time I got to see my husband, and I usually worked until 10 o'clock at night. And so then I would do it all again in the morning. And so I was really stressing my adrenals. And with my adrenal function getting stressed that much, my thyroid started to fail along with it. So I was extremely fatigued. That was another piece of thyroid that we see a lot too, is when people are just so tired, um, and they can't get over it, and they can still sleep a ton, and they don't have the energy, even though they're sleeping that much. So what I did was I decided to eat breakfast in the morning. That was one of the things. And I also did a little bit of prescription, and I did supplementation in order to get it back online. And a lot of people told me when it happened, they were like, well, you're just getting older, and it happens to you as you get older. And I thought, BS. Like, I'm not going that way. I guess that's why we started naturopathicmd.com, because I do not want to age without a fight. And so getting your thyroid in line is one of the first things that you can do to help you age gracefully, keep your head of hair, healthy skin, etc., and look younger and feel better. I mean, feeling better is definitely the most important part, I think, because age is really a state of mind. And if you're 25 years old and you don't sleep well and you have low thyroid function and you're gaining a lot of weight and you're losing your hair and you're depressed, then that's not a great quality of life. And so state of mind is a really important part of health. And did you know that they estimate about 30% of people who go to their psychiatrist with a complaint of depression are actually subacute hypothyroid? So the thyroid has a huge effect on the brain. Like I said, with hyperthyroid, you can have anxiety from that because your body's just going so fast. Well, the opposite is true with hypothyroid. A lot of people really complain of depression because the brain is a highly metabolic organ. It's estimated about 30 to 40% of all of the calories that you eat, the energy from that is used by your brain. And so that's why, people, need to eat when they're studying, or if you do a lot of work where you use your brain a lot, you can get hungry. And thyroid hormone, if you don't have enough, can be a reason for brain fog as well, just because you don't have the ability for your brain to really use the energy that it has because it doesn't have the thyroid hormone to help work that metabolism optimally. So we talked about Hashimoto's and the autoimmune disease. We talked about Graves' disease. Hashimoto's is something that we can add on autoantibody testing if you're curious about it, but usually that's caught by conventional practitioners. And when practitioners catch that, they will put you on thyroid hormone because they never really expect you to get better. Well, we expect you to get better, and there are ways to support your system so you don't necessarily need as much thyroid medication. Now, to be fair, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to take any hormones and I don't want to take any drugs. And that is your prerogative. That is fine. And I'm not anti-drug by any means, because I think that there is a time and a place. What we've set up with Naturopathic MD is functional medicine specialists. We want to help the body work better so it's able to work more optimally, so that you give it what it needs in order to produce the hormones naturally. However, thyroid hormone is one of the least problematic medications that you can take. And so it's one of the things that I'm the least worried about as far as prescribing for patients. I did get a horrifying Yelp review a number of years ago because one of my patients at the time wanted to use thyroid medication as a weight loss aid. And so it can be abused. And if I had decided to do what she told me that she wanted me to do, then I could have been endangering her to have heart problems or anxiety or other issues that medically I did not want to give her. And so that was a good lesson for me. Probably I could have maybe I could have handled it a little bit better communication wise, but unfortunately she wasn't open to that. So um, thyroid hormone can be abused in some ways. And I think that's why a lot of convention doesn't necessarily want to prescribe T3, which is the active form, because when you give T4, there's kind of safety mechanisms so people can't overdo it, because it does take time to convert from T4 to T3. And again, I said it happens in the peripheral parts of the body because T4 is kind of a storage form as well. So how do you make sure, if you are on thyroid hormone or thyroid medication, how do you make sure that it's working well? Because if you take T4, your TSH levels, let's say your TSH levels are abnormal. Usually the lab work goes from about 4.45 to 4.5 for TSH. So it's a pretty, wide range. Now, what happens if you're 4.4 with your conventional medical doctor? Nothing. Come back in 3 months, we'll test it again, and we'll see what happens. Well, what's likely going to happen? It's probably going to go up because nothing is being done to support it, and there's no education about how to support it. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But let's say you do go over your TSH. Let's say it comes back in 3 months and you're 4.7 and you're fatigued and you're constipated. That's another big thing that can be low thyroid indicator. You're losing hair. You have really, really difficult weight loss. You're tired all the time. And you kind of have swelling, and maybe you have a little bit of that goiter or swelling around your thyroid itself. And so you get put on levothyroxine or Synthroid. And those are two of the more common ones. And that is T4 hormone. Usually you take it first thing in the morning away from everything else because you need to make sure that you're absorbing it well enough and the hormone isn't just destroyed by the stomach or the digestion or is impaired with how you're absorbing it if food is around. So usually people take it just with water. They're supposed to take it away from calcium and away from food, like a half hour to an hour before anything else so that it can get absorbed. Now, if you're just on T4, that will tell your body to lower your TSH because it's got a feedback mechanism. It's kind of like a thermostat, or when a toilet fills up with water enough and turns off. And so that means that the body's like, well, I have enough T4, so I don't need to keep raising my TSH to tell the body, make T4, make more T4, make more T4, which is the signal that the body uses to communicate. So if you artificially add in the T4, then you're going to have a feedback mechanism and your TSH is going to go down. At that point, conventionally, you will be told that your thyroid is in range and you have the right prescription dose because the lab says so, even if your symptoms don't necessarily say so. And this is a big problem, I think, with convention, just because a lot of people's symptoms aren't managed, and they're not managed even though their thyroid labs say that they're perfect. And ideally, if people bring labs to me and it's just the TSH, if you're over 2 on that general range I gave you, I know your thyroid is sluggish. I know your thyroid is struggling. And so in that case, especially, that's proactive, right? That's preventative. That's taking the bull by the horns and deciding that we're going to do something about it. Well, it's over 2. That means that it's out of balance. What are we going to do to fix it? And so if you go to naturopathicmd.com, you can get appointments to talk about how to fix it. You can get lab work to see where your other levels stand. But just for your information now, if you're over 2 with your TSH, you're struggling. And it makes sense if you're tired. And it makes sense if you're depressed. And it makes sense if you're fatigued and you have trouble losing weight, and you're losing your hair, and you're constipated, and you have dry skin. That's another really big one too. People that have a lot of dry skin, often that's a thyroid thing because skin, again, turns over a lot. And so if you don't have the ability to turn over those cells very well, then that's where you can see some of those symptoms. So how do you convert your T4 to T3? Because if your level of TSH comes down into normal and your T4 prescription is is working, right? It's in there, you're absorbing it, you've had a feedback mechanism. But what if you're still tired? What if you still have these symptoms? Well, that's when probably the easiest thing to do, well, stress management is always a big part of it. And so stress, and we'll talk a little bit more about how the adrenal function is really tied to thyroid function in a little bit. But the easiest fix, the least toxic fix, the safest fix for you to do to see, and I've seen it work tons and tons of times, easy, take a little selenium. Selenium is necessary to turn T4 into T3 out in the tissues of your body. You can take about 200 to 400 micrograms a day. I have a link on our Facebook page where you can go and you can order some for yourself directly at naturopathicmd.com. We have a full medicinary where you can go in and you can use the code Logical Medicine to unlock the ability to get 10% off all of our supplements. And so there's a link there. You can go, you can order yourself some selenium and see if that helps your thyroid hormone work better. See if that makes you feel better. Selenium is awesome too because it's used in a lot of different processes in the body. It's a trace mineral, and so people don't get a whole lot of it unless you're eating a ton of Brazil nuts. So if you eat 5 Brazil nuts a day, you lower, with a selenium content from it, you lower your risk of heart attack and stroke significantly. It's really good for diabetics. It helps create antioxidants in the liver. I think I have a real thing for minerals. It's one of, if you've listened before, I'm sure that you know. Our American diet doesn't have enough minerals in it because our soils are depleted. My uncle posted something on Facebook today about a lot of farmers committing suicide in the United States, and it's a terrible tragedy at this point, but it's an industry and they can't keep up, and there's a lot of like big agro business that's pushing to put little farmers out of business, and big ag does not do you any nutritional favors because the only nutrients they put in the soil are phosphorus and nitrate. That's it. They don't remineralize. And that's why composting is so good, because what you do in organic farming is so good if you do it yourself, really, right? That's optimal. But if you compost, you take all of that good stuff and that waste from the food and you put it right back in the soil so other plants can use it. And the USDA did a study a couple of years ago that showed that the mineral content in just about all of our American foods has plummeted in the last 30 years. And so that's why supplementation is always such a good idea. And also, you need to eat a lot of Brazil nuts in order to get the selenium necessary to make these changes. And if you don't like them, or you get tired of them, or you're allergic to them, just take a small capsule of selenium. And if you can get that 200 microgram to 400 microgram dose a day, it's going to help your liver. It's going to help your thyroid. 2 of my favorite things. So I would definitely try that. And again, you can reach the link in our naturopathicmd.com Facebook page is Naturopathic MD. You can find us. And then there's also a link that you can reach us via the CTR network if you want to try that selenium. And again, it's relatively safe and it can significantly boost your metabolism and help get your T3 levels into range. And yet, if you have a high reverse T3, that takes a little bit more support. So, and we don't know that unless we test. Clinically, I can look at your history and talk to you about it and see if I really think that you have high reverse T3 probability, which if you've been under a lot of stress, if you've got a really difficult time losing weight, then you probably do. And in that case, you're in hibernation, and there's other things that we need to do that are usually prescriptions in order to manage that more effectively. You can do it without prescriptions, but it just takes a little bit longer. So we talked about how to convert T3 from T4. We talked about prescriptions. We talked about a lot of the symptoms that people can have with their thyroid. We talked about the testing. And so now let's talk about why. Why are we having so many problems with our thyroid? And for it to pass statin drugs as the number one most prescribed med, even when people are just doing it, when the range goes too high and you absolutely know you need the medicine, not just that you're in the range where it's still definitely not optimal, you're still having symptoms. To have that high of a rate of prescriptions for thyroid hormone is really concerning. But if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. We're in California and on the West Coast, Arizona, California. So if since 2011, there's been a 30% increase in babies born with cretinism or hypothyroid. Isn't that amazing? Let's think about what happened in 2011. Well, in 2011, Fukushima blew up in Japan and has been hitting us on the West Coast with radiation. Now, if any of you are old enough to remember the Cold War, and you had a bomb shelter in your basement like my grandfather did, do you know what everybody was supposed to have to protect themselves from nuclear fallout? Little bottles of it in your bomb shelters. Do you remember? Potassium iodide to protect the thyroid. Now, what did I say earlier? If you had an overactive thyroid and you had Graves' disease and your eyes were bugging out or you had thyroid cancer, how did they fix that? They gave radioactive iodine to kill the thyroid. So that iodine gets replaced and ruins the cells and the cellular mechanisms and machinery that produce thyroid hormone. So one of the things about fallout and nuclear radiation is that it creates radioactive iodine, which then gets caught in the thyroid, and your regular iodine doesn't work like it used to. That's why you take potassium iodide or potassium iodine, and it can replace that radioactive one so your thyroid can work better. Doesn't that make sense? And so on the West Coast especially, we're having a lot of issues. I'm seeing a lot of patients, especially those in Southern California, who are they're young and they're having elevated TSH. And I think it really is related to the radiation that we're being exposed to. I had a patient a couple of years ago who worked for the EPA. And one of their jobs was to do water testing for radiation levels and radioactive water testing along the coast of California. And after Fukushima, we saw it just kind of like go up and then go up and then go up. And then the EPA was like, yeah, we don't need to test it anymore. And this patient was like, wait a minute, it keeps going up. Don't we want to? They're like, no, it's okay. Don't worry about it. So we're getting hit by radiation quite a bit, probably more than we even know. I haven't gotten crazy enough where I'm going to get a Geiger counter yet, but I'm probably pretty close. I want to know. Well, instead of doing my Geiger counter, what I do is I take iodine, and I do it fairly regularly. I actually have liquid iodine that I give to children in order to protect their thyroids because they are very sensitive to radiation, etc. And you don't get a whole lot of iodine in your diet anymore. Well, why is that? Well, because no one is supposed to eat iodized salt, right? We have sea salt, Himalayan salt, Celtic sea salt, right salt, real salt, like all of these other salts that we're not supposed to use, or we're supposed to use instead of iodized salt. But iodized salt is the only place we really get iodine in our American diet. So I guess it's kind of a catch-22, isn't it? The other part is we don't eat a whole lot of sea vegetables. So it's estimated that the average Japanese person eats about 12-ish milligrams of iodine a day in their diet. And so that's about the same amount as is in this pill right here. And this is one of my favorite supplements. This is a lot, actually. I usually start people out with 6.25, and there are links to the site as well that we're going to put up as far as how you can order yourself some iodine. But before you do so, we need to talk about some of the other things necessary just to be safe and effective, because there's a lot of gunk that can get caught up in the thyroid, and That's why as you start to put healthy iodine in that works, you really have to help the body detoxify because it can replace and kick out negative things that can cause health problems. So radioactive iodine would be part of that, right? So you want to make sure you're drinking a lot of water. You want to make sure that your detox pathways are open, that your body is able to remove toxicity well through your liver and your kidneys and all of that support. And so Naturopathic MD also has detox packages where you can make sure that you're getting these chemicals out of your body as well as you possibly can. Because we can't live in a bubble, right? We can't live in a bubble. We can only do what we can do in order to protect ourselves the best way possible, because otherwise you can drive yourself insane. And so liver support, kidney support, GI support, detoxification is all important when we're working with the thyroid. Otherwise, you can feel worse because you're kicking all these toxins out and giving them nowhere to go. And I'm not talking about putting your feet in some, magic bath that changes color, because I hate to break it to you, but it doesn't really work. They've done testing as far as like looking at the water and the toxins in the water beforehand and the toxins in the water after. And there's no real increase in what's coming out. But if it makes you feel better, go ahead and try it. But you definitely need to support your liver and your kidneys, etc. as well. So radiation is a big piece of what can counteract the thyroid. What about fluoride? So iodine is a halogen. If you remember your chemistry and your periodic table, there's this whole group called the halogens. And you've got iodine, fluoride or fluorine, bromine, and chlorine are all halogens. So we're getting a lot of fluoride and we're getting a lot of chlorine or chloride in our water. And so if you don't have a good water filter, like we recommend the Big Berkey, we actually have an Amazon recommendation page where you can go and see all of the things that we think we might have an Amazon problem. But we're using it for good. We're using our Amazon problem for good because we're letting you know what you can buy, like from cat litter to water filters to air filters to soaps and lipsticks and mascara and all of that other stuff, just to try to decrease your toxic load and get some responsible things that aren't going to harm your health or the health of the environment. So we've got different water bottles. And so the Big Berkey water filter is my personal favorite. I have the Royal Berkey, which is 3 gallons, because my brothers have the 1 gallon ones. And it's just, you know what? I don't have the kind of time to fill it up 15 times a day for the amount of water that I drink. And I water my plants with it and I water my dogs with it, not the cats. They can have the chlorine and the fluoride. Just kidding, cat lovers. So we all drink this purified water that comes out of the Royal Berkey or the Big Berkey. You can get other ones as well, but that's just the one that I like. So you can look for us. It's the Bad Girl's Guide to Living Well on Amazon if you're looking for it, as far as the affiliates link. But even if you just Google the Big Berkey or the Royal Berkey, Amazon is the best place to buy it usually because they can ship anywhere in the United States. And that's going to take out the chlorine, and that's going to take out the fluoride. And also, if you think about it, where else are you getting fluoride? I mean, you can get it from toothpaste. There's really good research that shows that fluoride, it's a radioactive byproduct. Did you know that? And I'm sure that you can go and you can get conspiracy theorists all over as far as looking at why they've been putting it in water, because, it can strengthen teeth, right? But it can also cause the white spots on teeth. It can cause osteomalacia, which is weakening of bones when you get too high amounts. And it's also a neurotoxin that can lower IQ levels. And I don't know if you saw, but CNN just did some report about how human IQ levels have plummeted in the last few years. So where's it coming from? Probably toxicity. Some people would say screens. I don't think they've been around long enough for that to really happen, especially with the young. And so I definitely think it's toxicity. And fluoride is a big part of that, as well as other heavy metals and ad nauseum. So with fluoride and chlorine is also used in pools. So if you don't have a salt pool or you don't swim in a salt pool, it's a good idea to convert if you have the ability to do it, because you can get a lot of chlorine exposure. And it's not only not good for your skin and your hair, but it's also really problematic for your thyroid, because the chlorine can get caught in the thyroid as well. And that's why when you start replacing it and putting the good iodine in, then you can feel really terrible, because you can get chlorine toxic or fluoride toxic or radioactive iodine toxic. And that's not what we want. We don't want to do something that we think is good for our health and then have it backfire because we didn't support our body the way that it needed to do. And that's why naturopathicmd.com is such a great resource for people, because we can help hold your hand and guide you through that process so that you know that what you're doing for your health is the best thing that you could possibly be doing for your health, because you have a team of experts working with you. So what's the other one? What's another halogen? Bromine or bromide. Oh my goodness. Do you know what that's in? Usually bleached white flour. Whoops. What does almost every packaged processed food that you can think of probably has a little bit of bleached white flour, even unbleached? I mean, there is the chemical in that. There's actually a chemical. We'll talk about this next week. Next week is going to be about sugar, just because I do want to rain on everybody's parade. But there is a chemical in bleached white flour that kills the pancreas cells that create insulin. And so not only are you causing a spike in your blood sugar, you're also making it more problematic for your body and more difficult for your body to even make insulin to protect it and use it. So that's just a little taste of what we're going to talk about next week and how food can be toxic. And that's why we recommend whole foods. And we've got a great holistic nutritionist that we can work with to create meal plans for people that work with us, so that you can know how to support your body best and feed your body best. Because if you are what you eat, you don't want to be fake, fast, cheap, or easy, right? Or processed. Yuck. And there's good reasons for all of this. And so in order to have thyroid health, you have to protect it and try to avoid putting more of these negative things into your system, and then give it what it needs to work better. Now, there is nothing that any of us can really do about nuclear meltdowns that happen in other countries, thousands of miles across the ocean. And tinfoil hats and Faraday cages aren't going to protect us from that. So all you can do is protect your body the best way that you can, based on physiology and science. And taking some iodine is one of the ways that you can do that as far as protecting the thyroid. The other good things would be antioxidants, whether you're getting them from food or whether you're getting them from supplementation. I personally do not think that the environment is so toxic. Our lives are so toxic, and we're inundated with 80,000 different industrial chemicals, not to mention EMFs and air pollution and things in our food and things in our water and things, in our air. And gosh, it could make you insane. And so you can't control a lot of that. I talk the serenity prayer to myself, and I get a little OCD about it, because when I first started looking into environmental medicine, I was quite young, and it was when the New York Times was doing big full-page ads for anti-GMO ads, trying to not allow them to hit our shelves. And I was working on a book with a distinguished professor in Florida to talk about how environmental problems were having significant impacts on health. And so I was doing that when I was quite young. So it's been almost 20 years that I've been working on this. Don't mean to date myself, but the environment has a significant effect on health, and you need to be able to protect yourself. When I first started doing this, I got a little crazy, and I didn't eat really anything except what I really wanted to eat for a while, because I thought, well, if they're poisoning me anyway, I might as well have fun. That is an attitude for the very young, right? And unfortunately, with the health problems that I'm seeing in the very young now, they don't have the luxury to do that. because their bodies are already compromised in a lot of ways. Some of the sickest people I see are in their 20s and 30s because they've been exposed to processed foods longer than the rest of us. They've been exposed to EMFs longer than the rest of us, and a lot of toxins, wherever they come from. And so their body is poisoned already, which makes them weaker than we were. And so they don't have that luxury. What we try to do at Naturopathic MD is we try to increase your body's resilience and leeway that you have. So you know what? You can have a cheeseburger, and it might drop your vitality a little bit, especially if it's not, grass-fed, grass-finished organic cheeseburger with organic cheese and gluten-free, whatever, right? Let's just say you go to In-N-Out and you have lettuce-wrapped cheeseburger, okay? That's going to lower your resilience because it's probably not what your body really needs to fuel itself very well. You're not going to have symptoms if you have leeway. So it'll drop a little bit, but you're probably not going to feel that bad. Now, if you do it every day, and then you drink soda and you don't sleep and you wear lipstick that has lead in it and whatever, at some point you're going to pass that leeway and you're going to start to get sick and you're going to start to have symptoms. Some people are super lucky. You know what? They got this much. And some people have this much. And who knows why? But if you need to build up your resilience and you need more leeway, we can help. And one of the ways to do that is to look at lifestyle and look at functional medicine. So we talked about iodine and how important it is. Like the average Japanese person, for their health that they have there's some of the, there's islands, I think it's Okinawa, where they have some of the oldest people alive on the planet live there. They're in Greece, okay? There's an island in Greece, which is where I hope to retire. But I want good quality of life, long term, into my hundreds. I want to feel good. I want to be able to do yoga, and I want to be able to laugh and not be in pain and move around, enjoy the sunshine and enjoy my family, right? I mean, that's what we want. We don't want to lay in a bed for 5 years and just wait for our whole system to shut down. And so that's why we do what we do. But what about Greece and Japan is similar? Well, they're both by the water. And that's where you get sea vegetables. And you get iodine from sea vegetables and seafood. There's other aspects to it as well. I mean, ouzo is probably an antioxidant we just haven't figured out yet, but that's for another show. So we want to have these healthy, vital foods, which people in Greece and Japan both do a pretty good job with. Plus, they're by the water, and so they're more likely to be getting iodine. Who knows what's going on in Japan now with Fukushima and the fallout that they're having there. But you also want to make sure, because a lot of sea vegetables come from Japan, that you're getting them from clean sources, because they could be radioactive because of the way that the oceans have been flooded with radiation there. So now is probably the time to talk about the role of stress and your thyroid. And we'll get into the supplements a little bit more. First, I guess, in order to make thyroid hormone, you need a couple of things. You need your thyroid to be working well and not sluggish. And you need something called tyrosine, and you need iodine. Tyrosine you can get, pretty easily from your food. It's not a something that a lot of people have trouble getting enough of. But if you want to optimize, it can be really helpful to supplement with. Tyrosine is great for your endorphins. It's great for your adrenals. It's good for your thyroid. And it also has roles in making melanin. And so I'm trying to experiment right now to see if I can take enough so that I can reverse all my gray hairs. We'll see. I haven't been consistent enough with it yet. But there have been some really awesome studies done by the military showing that if you give people adequate amounts of tyrosine, so if you give soldiers in combat in terrible, stressful situations with sleep deprivation and cold temperatures, et cetera, right? They did this with special forces and other guys because they sign up, to get experimented on. If you give them big doses of tyrosine, and some of them were like 20 grams a day. This bottle I just showed you is 500 grams, right? I don't recommend anybody to take 20 grams a day, but it was safe for the troops. Okay. But they were in young men, healthy men. And so you don't want to hit those levels. I just wanted to illustrate that it's a relatively safe thing that you get from food, but you can help. So they gave them to these troops, and all of the sleep deprivation, all of the cold, all of the stress that they were under, and they were still able to function mentally and energetically at peak levels. So it insulated those people under stress, from that stress, and helped them make these hormones that keep you able to function and have good clarity of thought. So those are two of my favorites, and I'm doing my own experimentations with those. Now, that brings up the adrenal glands. And we'll do a whole show about that because it's really, really complicated. But if your adrenal glands, and I was sharing about how my hair was coming out when I was younger, it has since stopped as long as I behave myself and I don't get too far away from my leeway by staying up late and being too much of a bad girl. That's the whole point of this show. And I take my adrenal support. So the company that I love for both the thyroid and the adrenal is a company called RLC Labs. You can order these at naturopathic.com under our health resources and our order supplements link. And so you can take those. And that's one that you probably should do under more direction with a practitioner. It's kind of a higher level. It's the one I take, and I'm under a gargantuan amount of stress. And so if you're at lower levels of stress or you just want to try it out, then you can contact us and we can direct you a little bit more if you want us to do a health review as far as like simple things that you can take. But I love this one because it's so well-rounded. And if you support your thyroid and you are still tired, if you do your selenium and you are still tired, that usually means that your adrenals aren't functioning as well as they should be, and you need to support them. Because a lot of people, when you have stress, you burn through your resilience and you burn through your adrenals' ability to adapt to that stress. And that's why the Russians have been doing studies for the last 60 years on adaptogens like ginseng, which is in this supplement, etc. And so not only can you take selenium and iodine, I do recommend doing a complete mineral because, as I said, our minerals are so low. This is a pretty good one that you can get. You can also order that at naturopathicmd.com. But if you are replacing with your thyroid and you're putting in iodine and you're displacing that other bad stuff that you want to make sure doesn't go into your body and cause more problems, then the detox support is really important. And you can order a detox package through us at naturopathicmd.com, and that can give you a pretty good start as far as anything. I mean, volatile organic compounds, if you're sensitive to the smell of like gasoline or cigarettes or perfumes, or if you get rashes from different creams or detergents that you're using, etc., then you need to detox. And that's one of our packages there are things that you can order that'll get you a really good start as far as how to do that. So one way that you can get good sea vegetables, and this is a thing that I actually put on popcorn and trick people into eating, and you can order this online pretty easily. It's on our Bad Girls Guide to Living Well Amazon page, and it's it's kelp seasoning. And it's organic. It's an excellent source of iodine, and you can put it on eggs. You can eat it basically kind of salty. And so you can put it on eggs. It's green, and it tastes, I really like it. I put it on popcorn, eggs, salads too. Anytime you want a little bit of extra salt, I'll put it in soups, etc. And it's a way that you can get more iodine into your diet. So we talked about adrenal fatigue and supplements. You can do testing at naturopathicmd.com. You can get consults at naturopathicmd.com. And the thyroid, I hope that I've educated you about it today and why it's so important and how if it's not working well, you're not optimized in your life. And we do have great options to support you in your health at naturopathicmd.com. This is the Bad Girls Guide to Living Well. We are a podcast on iHeartRadio. And you can follow us on Instagram if you want to see what we do in our in our day-to-day life as far as life hacks, that's a good place to do it because pictures really do say 1,000 words, even though I'm a motor mouse. So you got a lot of 1,000 words today. But follow us on Instagram. It's naturopathicmd.com. We're also on Twitter and Facebook. And I hope you have a beautiful day. Tune in next week. We're going to be talking about sugar and diabetes and how we can optimize and enjoy our best health. So this is Dr. Heather Down with the Bad Girl's Guide to Living Well, and I'll see you next week. Have a great day.